I was born on August 25th, 1920, and I'm 93 plus.
June 15, 1918, and it was, I'm sure, a lovely day.
Good morning. And let me say something that might genuinely stop you in your tracks. Everything you think you know about getting older, the habits you believe are protecting you, the routines you built with care, the things your well-meaning family keeps encouraging you to do, a significant portion of it is working against you. Not slightly. Not in some minor, theoretical way. Actively, measurably, working against you every single day. And today, I'm going to walk you through 10 things that seniors do as they age that nobody sits you down and honestly explains. Not your physician during a rushed 15-minute appointment. Not the wellness articles your daughter sends you. Not the pharmaceutical commercials that know your name by now. Nobody. Some of what I'm about to share will surprise you. Some of it will make you uncomfortable in the best possible way. And at least one of these, the one I will reveal at number 1, is something so universal, so invisible, and so deeply normalized that it has quietly shortened the lives of people I have personally cared for. People who were doing everything they thought was right. I've spent over 2 decades working in geriatric medicine. I have sat across from thousands of patients between the ages of 60 and 91. I have reviewed their charts, held their hands through difficult diagnoses, and watched some of them reclaim a vitality that even their own families had stopped expecting. And what I've learned in those 20 years is this. The most dangerous things affecting seniors are rarely dramatic. They are quiet. They are ordinary. They look exactly like common sense. That is what makes them so costly. A research initiative tracking more than 11,000 adults over the age of 65 across a span of 10 years found something that genuinely disturbed the team that conducted it. The majority of participants were engaging in multiple daily behaviors that were directly accelerating their physical and cognitive decline. And not a single one of them had been told. Not one. They were living their lives, making reasonable choices, following the advice they'd been given, and those choices were quietly costing them. That is what we are unpacking today. We are counting down from 10 to 1. And I promise you, by the time we reach number 1, you will look at your daily routine differently. Not with fear. With clarity. Because understanding is always the first step toward change, and change is always possible. I have seen it at 70. I have seen it at 82. I have seen it at 90. The body is far more forgiving than the world gives it credit for. Before we begin, I want to ask you something personal. Hi viewers. What is the one word you would use to describe how aging has felt so far, expected or unexpected? Drop it in the comments right now. One word. That is all. I read every single one, and your answer today might shape what we cover next. Now, let's begin. And let's start with number 10, because number 10 is the one that tends to make people laugh nervously when I bring it up, because they already know they're guilty. Number 10 is something I see constantly, and it begins with the best of intentions. It is the habit of avoiding all dietary fat. Seniors across the board, people who are genuinely trying to do right by their bodies, have spent decades absorbing the message that fat is the enemy. Fat causes heart disease. Fat makes you fat. Cut the fat, live longer. And so they do. They switch to low-fat everything. They avoid olive oil. They skip the eggs. They feel responsible doing it. And their brains are quietly starving. Here is what that messaging never told you. After the age of 65, the brain becomes more dependent on dietary fat, not less. Approximately 60% of the dry weight of the human brain is fat. The myelin sheath, the protective coating around every nerve fiber that allows your thoughts to travel quickly and clearly from one part of your brain to another, is made almost entirely of fatty acids. When you chronically underconsume healthy fats, that sheath begins to thin. Signals slow. Memory retrieves information less efficiently. Mood becomes harder to regulate. And the connection between what you ate for breakfast and how clearly you are thinking by mid-afternoon is more direct than most people ever realize. Research published in the journal Neurology found that seniors with the highest intake of healthy monounsaturated fats, the kind found in olive oil, avocados, and nuts, showed significantly slower rates of cognitive decline over a 6-year follow-up period compared to those consuming low-fat diets. But the damage does not stop at the brain. Your joints need fat too. Specifically, omega-3 fatty acids, which are the primary raw material your body uses to produce anti-inflammatory compounds that lubricate joint tissue and slow cartilage breakdown. Seniors avoiding fat are often seniors in more joint pain than necessary, and they have no idea the two things are connected. The correction is not complicated. 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil daily. A small handful of walnuts. Fatty fish like salmon or sardines twice a week. These are not indulgences. After 65, they are maintenance. Number 9 will challenge something that the supplement industry has spent billions of dollars making you believe. It is the habit of relying entirely on supplements while ignoring the absorption crisis happening inside the gut. Walk into any senior's kitchen, and you will likely find a dedicated shelf. Rows of bottles. Vitamin C, calcium, magnesium, B12, zinc, fish oil. Some seniors spend $200 a month or more on supplements, faithfully taking them every morning, believing they are covered. Believing the gap between what they eat and what they need is being filled. But here is what the label on the bottle does not tell you. After the age of 65, the stomach produces significantly less hydrochloric acid. This condition, called hypochlorhydria, is extraordinarily common in older adults and almost never discussed openly. That acid is not incidental. It is the mechanism by which your body breaks down and releases nutrients from everything you consume, food and supplements alike. Without adequate acid, even a high-quality supplement passes through the digestive system largely intact. You absorb a fraction of what you swallow. A study from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that older adults with reduced stomach acid absorbed as little as 20% of the B12 from standard oral supplements. 20%. The rest was lost. And here is what makes this genuinely alarming. Certain supplements actively compete with each other for absorption. Calcium, when taken alongside magnesium and zinc, significantly reduces the absorption of both. Iron and calcium block each other. High-dose vitamin E can interfere with vitamin K. Seniors taking multiple supplements simultaneously, which is nearly every senior I see, may be creating a daily competition inside their gut where the nutrients they need most are losing. The practical correction has 2 parts. First, ask your physician to test your actual nutrient levels through blood work rather than assuming supplementation is working. Second, separate your supplements strategically. Fat-soluble vitamins like D, A, E, and K with your largest meal. Magnesium at night. B vitamins in the morning. And consider a digestive enzyme supplement taken with meals to support the acid production your stomach is no longer providing reliably on its own. A supplement that is not being absorbed is not a supplement. It is an expensive ritual. Number 8 is the one that goes deepest. Not because it is the most physically dangerous item on this list, though the physical consequences are very real, but because it touches something profoundly human. It is the quiet, gradual adoption of an old person identity. It happens so slowly that most people cannot point to the moment it began. One day you stop trying that new restaurant because it feels like too much effort. Then you stop attending events that require you to meet new people. Then your daily life shrinks to a familiar circuit of the same rooms, the same routines, the same conversations. And you call it simplifying. You call it knowing yourself. You call it peace. But your brain calls it something very different. The human brain is a prediction machine. Its primary function is to build and refine a model of the world, and it does that through novelty and challenge. When novelty disappears, when every day is structurally identical to the one before it, the brain enters a maintenance mode. It stops building. It stops growing. And in neuroscience terms, what does not grow actively begins to decline. Research from the University of Edinburgh found that seniors who consistently engaged in mentally unfamiliar activities, things outside their established competence, showed measurably greater preservation of white matter in the brain, the tissue responsible for rapid communication between brain regions, compared to those who stuck entirely to familiar routines. I had a patient named Bernard, 76 years old, retired engineer from Columbus, Ohio. By every external measure, he was fine. Healthy diet, regular walks, good family around him. But he had quietly stopped being curious. He watched the same programs, read only what confirmed what he already believed, avoided anything that made him feel like a beginner. When he came to see me, his cognitive processing speed had declined more than expected for his age. His reaction times were slow. He described life as feeling flat. We prescribed novelty. Deliberately, he joined a beginner woodworking class, something he had never done, something that made him feel like a student again. Within 6 months, his own family noticed the difference. His eyes were sharper. His humor returned. He told me, "I forgot what it felt like to not know something yet." The identity you hold about what you are capable of at your age is not a reflection of biological reality. It is a story. And stories can be rewritten. Now, before we continue into the top 7, I want to say something directly. If what you are hearing today is making you think about someone you love, someone over 60, who needs to hear this, share this with them. Not later. Right now. Because some of this information genuinely cannot wait. Number 7 is going to be a difficult one for families to hear. It is the habit of allowing well-meaning loved ones to over-assist, and the silent physical and cognitive cost of having too much done for you. This comes entirely from love. A daughter who insists on carrying the groceries. A son who takes over the yard work because he worries. A spouse who handles all the cooking because it is easier and faster. Every single one of those gestures comes from a place of genuine care. And every single one of them, when they become the permanent pattern, chips away at something irreplaceable. Physical independence is not just a matter of dignity. It is a biological driver. The small physical demands of daily life, carrying bags, preparing meals, navigating stairs, bending to tend a garden, these are not just tasks. They are the low-grade, consistent physical stimulation that maintains muscle tone, preserves balance, keeps the cardiovascular system active, and crucially, engages the brain in the coordination and planning that prevents decline. Research from the Journal of Aging and Health found that seniors who maintained higher levels of daily functional activity, meaning they continued doing ordinary things for themselves, retained significantly greater physical and cognitive function over a 5-year period than those whose activity was taken over by family or caregivers. Even when the caregiver assistance was well-intentioned and the seniors themselves were initially capable. When you remove challenge from a capable person's life, you do not protect them. You accelerate the very decline you are trying to prevent. I had a patient named Gloria, 71 years old, from Atlanta, Georgia. After a minor knee procedure, her family took over everything. Every errand. Every household task. For 8 months, Gloria was lovingly managed into near-complete inactivity. When she came back to see me, she had lost significant muscle mass, her balance had deteriorated markedly, and she told me something I have never forgotten. She said, "I feel like a guest in my own life." We worked together to rebuild her functional independence gradually and safely. Her family learned to help less and encourage more. Within a year, Gloria was doing her own grocery shopping, cooking 4 nights a week, and had returned to her garden. Helping someone age well sometimes means stepping back and letting them do the hard thing themselves. Number 6 is something I want every person watching this to take seriously, because the research on this has become impossible to ignore. It is the widespread misunderstanding of sleep quality versus sleep quantity. Most seniors know they should sleep enough. And so when they spend 8 or 9 hours in bed and wake up exhausted, they assume the problem is that they simply need more. They go to bed earlier. They sleep later. They nap in the afternoon. And the exhaustion continues. Because the problem was never the amount of time spent in bed. It was what was happening during that time. After the age of 65, sleep architecture changes in ways that are both significant and poorly communicated by most physicians. Deep sleep, the stage during which the brain performs its most critical restorative functions, consolidates memory, clears metabolic waste through the lymphatic system, and repairs cellular tissue, decreases substantially. Older adults spend less time in deep sleep and more time in lighter stages that feel like sleep but deliver a fraction of the restorative benefit. This means a senior can spend 9 hours in bed and wake up running on the equivalent of 5 hours of genuine restoration. Research from the University of California, Berkeley found that disrupted sleep architecture in older adults was directly associated with the accumulation of amyloid proteins in the brain, the same proteins strongly implicated in cognitive decline. This was not a marginal finding. The relationship was consistent and significant. And here is what I need you to hear clearly. A single night of fragmented sleep in an older adult does not recover fully with the next good night. The deficit compounds. Over weeks and months, the cumulative effect on memory, immune function, emotional regulation, and metabolic health is substantial. What actually helps is not more time in bed. It is protecting sleep quality. Consistent sleep and wake times, even on weekends. A bedroom temperature between 65 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit, which research has identified as the optimal thermal environment for deep sleep in older adults. No screens for at least 1 hour before bed. And evening light exposure reduced significantly after sunset to support the natural melatonin cycle that becomes more fragile with age. If you are waking unrefreshed despite adequate hours, do not simply accept that as aging. It is a signal. Bring it to your physician and ask specifically about sleep quality, not just duration. Number 5 will surprise people. Because it concerns a part of the body that almost nobody connects to brain health, heart health, or systemic aging. It is the habit of treating oral health as a cosmetic concern rather than a medical one. I understand why this happens. Dentistry exists in a separate professional lane from medicine. Insurance treats it separately. We were taught growing up that brushing and flossing was about appearances and cavity prevention. So when seniors scale back on dental care, whether for financial reasons, mobility challenges, or simply because it feels like a lower priority, they do not think of it as a health risk. But the research tells a completely different story. The mouth is not separate from the body. It is a direct gateway into the bloodstream, the respiratory system, and the cardiovascular system. The bacteria associated with periodontal disease, when chronic, release inflammatory compounds that enter the circulation and reach every organ. Studies from the Harvard School of Public Health have found that seniors with untreated gum disease show significantly higher rates of cardiovascular events, respiratory infections, and alarmingly, accelerated cognitive decline. A landmark study published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease found that a specific bacteria associated with gum disease was present in the brain tissue of patients with Alzheimer's at rates dramatically higher than in healthy controls. This does not prove causation with certainty, but the consistency of this finding across multiple independent research teams is something the medical community is taking very seriously. And there is more. Poor oral health in seniors is directly linked to reduced food intake and nutritional decline. When chewing becomes painful or difficult, seniors instinctively gravitate towards soft, processed foods and away from the fibrous vegetables, lean proteins, and whole foods their bodies most need. Dental problems become nutritional problems. Nutritional problems become metabolic problems. And the cascade continues. Twice daily brushing, daily flossing, and a dental visit every 6 months is not vanity maintenance after 65. It is disease prevention. It is brain protection. It is investing in every other healthy habit you are already working to maintain. What happens in your mouth does not stay in your mouth. Number 4 is the one that requires the most gentleness, because it touches on something that every person who lives long enough will face, and that most people face entirely alone. It is the habit of carrying grief without processing it. After 65, loss becomes a recurring companion. Friends, spouses, siblings, the version of yourself that moved through the world in a younger body, the career that gave you structure, the neighborhood that held your history. Seniors accumulate loss in a way that younger people have not yet experienced, and the cultural expectation around them is often to be strong, to adjust, to keep going. And so they do. They keep going. And the grief goes inward. Here is what unprocessed grief does to the body, because this is not metaphorical. It is physiological. Chronic unresolved grief maintains the body in a prolonged stress response. Cortisol remains elevated. Inflammatory markers rise and stay elevated. The immune system, already under greater pressure after 65, becomes further compromised. Research published in the journal Psychosomatic Medicine found that prolonged grief in older adults was associated with significantly elevated levels of systemic inflammation, reduced immune response, and measurably accelerated cellular aging as indicated by telomere shortening. Telomeres are the protective caps at the end of your chromosomes. They are one of the most reliable biological markers of how quickly the body is aging at the cellular level. Chronic emotional stress shortens them. And grief that is carried silently for years is among the most consistent sources of that stress I see in my practice. I had a patient named Miriam, 73 years old, from Savannah, Georgia. She had lost her husband 2 years before she came to see me, and by every external measure, she had handled it beautifully. She was composed. She was functional. She told me she was fine. But her blood work told a different story. Her inflammatory markers were persistently elevated. Her immune function was suppressed in ways inconsistent with her otherwise healthy lifestyle. Her sleep had quietly deteriorated. We began addressing the grief directly. A support group. A therapist who specialized in older adults. Regular structured conversation about her husband, not avoidance of it. Over the following year, her inflammation markers normalized. Her sleep quality improved. She told me she had not realized how much energy it had cost her to keep the sadness contained. Grief is not weakness. Carrying it silently is not strength. Processing it is one of the most powerful biological interventions available to an aging body. Number 3 is one that most seniors would argue is responsible behavior, which is exactly why it belongs on this list. It is the habit of aggressively restricting sodium without medical guidance, based on a blanket belief that all salt is harmful. Salt restriction became a universal health message over several decades, and for many people with specific cardiovascular conditions, it is medically appropriate and necessary. But the application of that message to all seniors, regardless of their individual physiology, has created a significant and underappreciated problem. After the age of 70, the body's ability to regulate sodium balance becomes less efficient. The kidneys respond more slowly to changes in sodium levels. Hormonal systems responsible for maintaining fluid balance, particularly the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, function less reliably. In this context, sodium that falls too low, a condition called hyponatremia, becomes a genuine clinical concern. Hyponatremia in older adults produces symptoms that are frequently misattributed to aging itself. Dizziness, cognitive fog, fatigue, unsteady gait. In more significant cases, confusion and disorientation. These are not rare side effects of an extreme situation. Mild hyponatremia is one of the most common electrolyte disturbances seen in hospitalized seniors, and a meaningful portion of those cases are connected to excessive unsupervised sodium restriction combined with high water intake. Research from the Clinical Journal of the American Society of Nephrology found that even mild chronic hyponatremia in older adults was associated with increased fall risk, impaired attention, and reduced bone density, because low sodium levels trigger the body to draw sodium from bone tissue, accelerating bone loss. This is not a case for reckless salt consumption. It is a case for individualized medical guidance, rather than blanket dietary rules applied without blood work or clinical oversight. If you are restricting sodium based on general advice rather than a specific medical recommendation from your physician based on your own laboratory values, have that conversation. Ask what your current sodium levels are. Ask whether your restriction level is appropriate for your specific physiology. Your body is not a general case. It is yours specifically, and it deserves to be treated that way. Number 2 is going to reframe something you have been told and have believed for a very long time. It is the habit of avoiding sunlight out of fear, and the cascade of consequences that avoidance sets into motion. Over the past several decades, the public health message around sun exposure has intensified to the point where many seniors actively minimize all contact with direct sunlight. They apply sunscreen immediately upon going outdoors. They stay inside during peak hours. They cover completely when they do venture out. And they believe they are being careful, responsible, health conscious. But there is a cost to this caution that is rarely discussed with the same urgency as the risk it is designed to prevent. The skin's ability to synthesize vitamin D from sunlight decreases by approximately 50% after the age of 60. Simultaneously, the kidneys become less efficient at converting the vitamin D produced or consumed into its biologically active form. The result is that even seniors who do spend time outdoors regularly are frequently vitamin D deficient. Seniors who actively avoid sunlight are almost universally so. And the consequences of that deficiency are not minor. Research from Harvard Medical School has linked chronic vitamin D deficiency in older adults to significantly elevated rates of depression, accelerated bone loss, impaired immune function, muscle weakness, and a 40% higher risk of cognitive decline. Vitamin D directly regulates the production of serotonin in the brain. It plays a critical role in the function of the immune system's first response cells. It influences the expression of genes involved in inflammation. It is not a peripheral nutrient. In the aging body, it is foundational. Beyond vitamin D, sunlight directly regulates the circadian rhythm through a separate mechanism involving light-sensitive cells in the eye that signal the brain's master clock. When seniors avoid morning light exposure, the circadian system, which governs sleep timing, cortisol release, body temperature cycling, and dozens of hormonal processes, becomes dysregulated. This contributes to the poor sleep quality we discussed at number 6, the low mood we see in number 4, and the fatigue and cognitive fog that seniors frequently accept as simply getting older. 10 to 15 minutes of direct morning sunlight, without sunscreen, before 10 in the morning, provides meaningful vitamin D synthesis and circadian entrainment with a level of ultraviolet exposure that skin cancer researchers consider low risk for most people. This is not a recommendation to abandon sun protection. It is a recommendation to stop treating sunlight as purely an adversary, because the evidence is clear that for older adults, avoidance carries its own serious biological cost. And now we arrive at number 1. I want you to stay with me here, because this is the one I have been building toward. This is the one I see in my practice more than any other. The one that operates so quietly, so invisibly, that by the time the consequences become obvious, the pattern has been running for years. Number 1 is the habit of treating the mind as a passenger. Let me explain exactly what I mean by that. The brain at any age is governed by a fundamental principle called neuroplasticity. It changes in response to demand. When it is challenged, it builds new connections, reinforces existing pathways, and maintains the density and speed of its communication networks. When it is not challenged, those networks thin. Pathways that are not used become less efficient. The brain, like every other organ in the body, responds to what is asked of it. After retirement, and often before, many seniors unconsciously shift into a mode of mental consumption rather than mental engagement. They watch rather than create. They receive information rather than wrestle with problems. They follow familiar routines that require very little active cognitive navigation. And because this feels comfortable, and because comfort after a long life of hard work feels entirely earned, Nobody flags it as a risk. But the science is unambiguous. A study from Rush University Medical Center followed more than 1,000 older adults over 12 years and found that those who engaged in regular cognitively stimulating activities, learning new skills, reading challenging material, engaging in complex social conversations, solving unfamiliar problems, were significantly less likely to develop cognitive decline and showed markedly slower rates of memory deterioration than those whose daily mental life had become largely passive. The brain does not plateau. It is always moving in one direction or the other, building or declining. There is no maintenance mode that lasts. I had a patient named Walter, 79 years old, from Birmingham, Alabama. Retired high school principal. Brilliant man. Decades of sharp, demanding mental work followed by what he described as a well-earned quiet life. Television. Familiar books. Sudoku puzzles he had been doing long enough that they no longer felt like puzzles. When he came to see me, his memory had become inconsistent in ways that worried him. His processing speed was slower than his age alone would account for. He was not in crisis, but he was declining faster than he should have been. We sat together, and I asked him one question. When was the last time your brain had to work for something it did not already know how to do? He was quiet for a long time. We built a prescription for cognitive demand. A community Spanish class, a language he had never studied. A local history project that required him to conduct interviews and organize information into written summaries. Monthly attendance at a structured debate group where he was required to argue positions he did not personally hold. 14 months later, his memory scores had stabilized. His processing speed had measurably improved. And in our last appointment, he leaned forward and told me something I want to share with you directly. He said, "I thought I was resting my brain. I didn't realize I was abandoning it." Your brain is not asking for rest. It has had enough rest. What it is asking for, what it requires to remain strong and sharp and present, is to be taken somewhere it has not been before. Give it something new. Regularly. Consistently. Without apology. Here is what I want you to take from everything we have covered today. Aging is not a fixed destination that arrives and sets. It is a direction. And direction can be changed. Every single thing we discussed today, from the fat you avoid to the grief you carry quietly to the mind you have stopped challenging, every one of these is adjustable. Not perfectly. Not overnight. But meaningfully and genuinely adjustable. I have watched patients in their early 80s rebuild muscle. I have watched women in their mid-70s reverse inflammatory markers that their previous physicians had accepted as permanent. I have watched men who had quietly resigned from their own lives find their way back through something as simple as a class, a conversation, or a decision to stop accepting what they had been told was inevitable. The body is not finished with you. And you are not finished with it. If what you heard today shifted something in your thinking, please subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss what we release each week. Leave a comment below telling me which of these 10 surprised you the most. Share this with someone over 60 who deserves to hear it. Because some of this information, the right information at the right moment, genuinely changes the direction someone is heading. Take care of yourself. You have earned that, and you are absolutely worth it.